Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris of Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
Hey, John, how are you doing?
Sam, I'm doing fantastically. I'm certainly doing better than anyone who's trying to get in between Elon Musk and Donald Trump right now. This particularly after the release or the content where people finding out about the contents of one big beautiful bill.
You have members of Congress saying, "Well, I didn't have a chance to read it, or I didn't read it," and
You're
I
talking
didn't
about Miss
see-"
Green, I think you are.
and some others, but yeah, saying, "Oh, I didn't even realize that was in there," and that's not a new phenomenon.
No, it's not.
But it's and honestly, I guess I appreciate the honesty from the people saying, "I didn't read it."
I didn't read it.
Yeah.
However, from what I understand, you can't blame Marjorie Greene for not reading the entirety of the bill because, from what I've read, it was something like 1,038 pages. So anyone that said that they have read every single word of every single page is either lying or a pretty big dork. I mean, seriously. What do you think about that?
Or some combination of the two.
So, I mean, I would imagine what will happen in a lot of these congressional offices, you'll get the congressperson gets the bill where their staffers do. They cut it up into various parts. Everyone in the office gets something. Either that or they scan it all up into ChatGPT or other AI to have them spit out an executive summary. I would imagine now, these days, it's probably more the latter than the former, but that's the way they used to do it, the former, back when I was coming along. Just everyone got a section, they read it, and had an executive summary.
And it's amazing to see, almost any bill like this, and especially one being called the One Big Beautiful Bill, where you're throwing everything together.
Yeah.
How much stuff is in these bills that is not related to the bills itself? And again, this is more of an all-encompassing, and they're trying to accomplish several things at once. But almost any bill, it could be named for some topic that they're trying to get past, and there's things completely unrelated thrown into this bill. And I think that's one of the things that just frustrates people with politics in general.
Yes, I have not read all the pork that's written into the One Big Beautiful Bill. But
Well, you're not voting on it, so
no,
I
I'm
think
not
you get a
voting.
pass.
I get a pass on it. I've not read all that, but in the past I have read some of that stuff, like in the Inflation Reduction Act and the other ones, other stimulus programs, just things like $10 million here, $10 million there, so-and-so's pet project in, Nova Scotia or some crazy place, just money that we have no business spending as a country. And I'm certain that there's plenty of that there. But really, when I read all this, or I read what the sort of the executive summaries and summation pages and all that stuff, and I read people, it's almost histrionics. This is horrible. This is going to cause the U.S. Treasury to have even more problems. It's going to blow up the deficit. I'm going, is that your argument? That the One Big Beautiful Bill is going to blow up the deficit? That's kind of like saying, should we shoot the guy with 6 slugs or with 8? Mm-hmm. Because that's about where we are now. Because right now, according to budget estimates, Treasury estimates, we'll collect just short of $5.4 billion this year. That's a lot of money. Trillion. That's an all-time high. And I think that's bigger than the total economy of any other country in the G7. Unfortunately, we're on pace to spend about $7.2 trillion.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. $7.2 trillion bucks. The federal budget has grown by 45% over the last 5 years. And so when you take a look at this type of stuff, I don't care what's in this budget. I really don't. I don't care what the marginal tax rate scheme is because it's irrelevant in a lot of ways. We have to grow the economy that much more rapidly than we currently are, and we have to sit on spending. There's no other argument. Everything else is noise.
Well, 100% is, and I think the frustration from some people is that the talk of, it even goes back to Doge and the talk of, and we've already talked about this last week, but the trillions of dollars of promised cuts.
Yes.
One, okay, not two. We'll do one.
Where are they?
We'll do $100 billion, and then you start cutting Adobe Photoshop contracts, and I'm kind of like,
that's not really. It's going to take a lot of those.
You need a billion of those contracts.
Yeah, I need cuts of at least $1 billion at a clip.
Yeah, and so that shift and the shift away from we're going to make progress on balancing the budget, and talk of the CBO being politicized, and I don't really buy that fully. And so we've shifted. It's just doing more of the same, I think, is probably the simplest way to put it. When, there's been talk when before Trump was president in 12 and 11, 12 and 13, 14, when Obama was still in office, he was talking about, why is Congress extending the deficit or the debt ceiling? And now we're doing the same thing. And so this frustration of saying, when you're not in power, why are they doing this? Why are they spending money? To now we're in power and we're going to, at best, kick the can down. Continue.
We're going to behave in the exact same way.
At best.
Yeah.
And at worst,
we're just going to do the exact same thing. We just don't have to bitch about it any longer.
Yeah. And so it just is this cycle, and there's very few members of Congress that are really pushing back on it. And I can think of, on one hand, the amount of Republicans that are pushing back on it. And there's probably more than 5, but vocally, it's a handful of them. And so that frustration, I think, is really kind of bubbling up. And, whether that's the true reason Elon is pushing back against Trump now, I think there's probably some other things built into it.
I think there's probably some other things.
I know he's disappointed in the pulling of Isaacson's nomination with NASA.
Probably disappointed in the lack of EV credits for
the Wall Street Journal saying the Isaacson pulling that nomination is really kind of a bee in his bonnet. But nonetheless, this is something that Elon had clearly been passionate about and clearly been the driver of the creation of Doge, was cutting out waste and balancing the budget. And so to then push a bill that only further escalates the issue is frustrating, and there's nobody really to stop it.
Well, it's kind of like, what was all of January and February, March about? Waving, chainsaws around and going and busting up USA and all that. What was that all about? I mean, if all of a sudden we get here and none of that's really taken care of, and perhaps maybe some of these people get their job. I don't know. It just seems like we wasted a lot of energy on this just to get back to, the same old way of doing things.
The exact same way.
And so what's frustrating for me is our budget deficit is not a problem if we don't want it to be a problem. I did the math. I'm writing about this for Common Sense this week, and get a load of this. If we can freeze federal expenditures at $7.2 trillion right now, and keep and have tax receipts as a percent of GDP average around 18%, about where they are. All the data will be in the newsletter. If about like that, we would need to grow the economy 3.1% in real terms for the next 5 years. And then we would have a budget deficit of $26 billion. Of course, you have to freeze the expenditures at current levels and grow the economy at 3.1%. We haven't been able to grow to 3.1% for a sustained period of time in a very long period of time, but that's not an outrageous number, I don't think, 3.1%. And the more painful thing for a lot of folks is just freezing the spending. Now, that would cause some real economic pain. I'm not going to tell you that it wouldn't, but can we do that for 5 years? Do you think maybe to help offset some of the pain, the loss of purchasing power for some of our people receiving entitlements and what have you, we could come up with $200 billion a year in tax savings someplace else? And if we did that, we wouldn't even be talking about the budget deficit. But we apparently, as a society, don't want that. We just want to kick the can down the road. We want to elect people that kick the can down the road so we don't have to feel any sort of pain. The problem with that is pain's just going to be that much worse when we eventually have it if we aren't willing to take something out.
And I agree. And I don't get why, if companies are in a spot where they can't raise prices or what have you, they're going to find ways to maintain their margin, right?
Of course
they're going to maybe go back to suppliers and renegotiate and what have you. I don't get why that is a guarantee that companies can do this and that the federal government can't do it. I get the difference between the two and why it's more difficult, but if companies can go out and maintain margins regardless of what is going on outside of their company, whether it's tariffs, whether it's COVID, what have you, companies do what they have to do to maintain. And so if we had to maintain the expenditures where they are now, okay, yeah, we probably go back and look at some of these contracts. We'd look at some of these government, these defense contractors.
You would also start cutting headcount and replacing capacity with
The
technology.
The exact same thing
That's
companies
exactly
do.
what companies do. There's no reason why the federal government can't do that. We could do that starting now, just attrition, and people are replaced with with new computers for people and all that stuff. And I'm telling you, it's very doable. It's just a question of whether or not we want to experience the 5 years worth of pain in order to get there. People call it an austerity plan, but it's not really an austerity plan when you're spending $7.2 trillion a year. You're just freezing it.
And it would, that plan would be tough on asset prices and markets, I would assume. I mean, that is fiscal tightening.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like
you're not cutting the budget, but you're.
It's kind of like the term inflation. Inflation's contracting.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean prices are going down.
Yeah.
It would be tightening of fiscal policy.
Without a doubt.
A pretty significant tightening.
And there are a lot of companies that would get the whammy, particularly companies that depend on the federal government. But I'm here to tell you that what you would end up see happening is you would see a lot of that Doge type stuff finally get signed off on. I don't want to go back to my constituents in XYZ state and say I'm cutting Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid. You know what we're going to do? We're going to find out some ways where we can continue to add to that. If that means we have to cut some of this other stuff over here that I was yelling and screaming about last year, we're going to cut it.
Yeah, and we're never going to get to where we have a budget surplus. I mean
it's extremely unlikely.
And even just off the fact that a current account and capital account have to balance each other out, right? So
Yes.
We can't consume more than we create without borrowing money.
Yes.
I mean, that's just the dollars have to physically come from somewhere.
Yes.
And so but it's this unsustainable deficit that can change.
The unsustainable growth. I did the numbers over the last 5 years. I've already mentioned it. Last 5 years, from the first quarter of 2020 through now, the annualized growth rate is like 8.1%. That's nominal, of course, but that's huge. Mm-hmm. That's the annual growth rate in federal expenditures. That's simply not sustainable. I mean, it's just not. And
that puts it at real 5+%.
Yeah, I mean around like that for the last 5 years. The historical average is closer to 31.
When you're
or something
growing
like that.
at 2%, if you're lucky,
doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We have been spending money, and it feels so good, man. It feels so good going down. I think I've used the analogy previously, but it's like giving an ice cream sundae to a diabetic.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we've been doing. And now it's time to take that sundae away, and everyone's yelling and screaming about it. The only thing we should really be thinking of is how can we unfetter U.S. business, and how can we unfetter U.S. business, and how can we somehow cut out which isn't necessary in the federal budget? I mean, I don't see why this is so much of a problem.
It has to.
It's nuts to me. Why is this a problem?
Because nobody wants to be the one to be the one causing that pain, or to be the one.
No one wants to be unpopular. No one wants to get unelected or beaten in their next election, and so they can lose out on the power in the gravy train.
And especially the fact that a lot of this, the sheer size of the gap requires cuts to entitlement programs, or renegotiation and changes to entitlement programs, because we can't just wave a wand and decrease the interest expense.
No, we can't.
I fully believe, I'm all for spending a lot on defense, but I fully believe there is things that we could do to the defense budget.
You think?
I mean, it's like you see some of these testimonies in Congress, and I get these are not Home Depot bolts and screws, but these bolts and screws that look like the ones from Home Depot cost thousands of dollars per.
Well,
I get there's differences and what have you, but
Well, there's also some chicanery going on there saying no, we agreed to this, but you need to buy some additional products here. You can make up your margin by overcharging me for this.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it's been for a very long period of time. Back during the Reagan administration, I remember people complaining about like a $100 hammer and a $500 toilet seat, that type of
Or
stuff.
like I don't know if it's true, the stories of the pens we had to get for NASA and Russia just used pencils.
Yeah, I mean,
They worked it.
yeah, I mean, so that sort of thing. I mean, all that type of stuff. If we're serious about the budget deficit, all that stuff has to be on the chopping block.
Everything's on the table.
We have to put everything on the table. And if we care about our people and we want to maintain the purchasing power for people on Social Security, we don't see a major disruption in Medicare and Medicaid, and we've got to service our debt. These are things we have to do. By God, we're going to have to come up with some stuff that hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to have to come up with some stuff. Things like US aid. I hear you, man. But we were going to have to come up with some of these cuts from somewhere. They're just not going to materialize overnight and just out of the ether.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we just can't close that gap between a 2.5% growth rate and a 5.5% growth rate in real terms for the economy and federal spending. We'll never balance our budget.
Yeah, and I think part of the
It's
problem
only going to get worse.
is neither party wants the pain associated with it, and they want a scapegoat associated with it. And for the Republican Party, that is largely SNAP benefits and Medicaid.
I mean,
And they talk about fraud with SNAP, even though the percentages of fraud are relatively low, and it's every dollar of SNAP creates $1.50 in economic growth, and so. But that's an easy scapegoat for them to say that this is where we can cut large swaths for the CBO balances budget.
Listen, taking food out people's mouths is not a great way.
It's poor economic policy.
It's poor economic policy. It's poor visuals as well. Whereas, I'm certain that there are some other things we can do before I start taking food out of people's mouths. I mean,
WIC, the women, infant, and children programs, and
there's a lot of other stuff we can do. Now, taking a step sort of sideways and talking about what's perhaps a little bit more fun. I think we're both in agreement that we have to cut spending somewhere, and we have to grow the economy more rapidly if we want to get our budget deficits under control. Does it surprise you that there has been a fall apart between the president and Elon Musk?
It is very unsurprising, and if I had to put it on the timeline, June seems about right for when it should have happened. I mean, it just had to happen, right?
They're two of the most egomaniacal men in the world.
There's no way that goes 4 years
no
smooth
way.
sailing.
No way. I mean, I think you're being generous by saying June seems about right. Yeah. I thought getting out of the first quarter, I thought that something was magic going on there. But remember when that all happened, I was going, "This is no way this is going to last."
To me, what's surprising about it is how quickly, I'm not saying
it not just unraveled. I mean, it unraveled in a hurry.
And maybe behind the scenes, it's been slowly unraveling, and now we're just seeing it. But to me, from full outsider, it feels like it was over last weekend. I mean, because Elon was in the office talking about the bill as recently as, what was that, 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
With his son there, and
I mean, he's got his son on his shoulders, wearing a T-shirt, parading around the
black MAGA hats,
parading around the Oval Office like he owns the joint. And now here we are watching the television this week, and my Lord, you would think that the two guys are going to fight a duel with one another.
Yeah, so it's not surprising, but shocking how quickly I would say it's unraveled, to the point of saying he wouldn't have even been elected if it wasn't for me, to saying maybe we should have a new political party that represents the 80%. I mean, that's pushing back. That may not seem like it, but to me, that's pushing back pretty hard on the administration.
Okay, now, and while we're on those personalities, and I want to focus a little bit on Elon Musk, and then we're going to be pushing up against time. I don't think either of us have any problem with the concept behind Doge.
No.
Going through and trying to find some fat, and let's try to eliminate it. I will tell you why. At the end of the day, by the time the smoke settled and the dust cleared and smoke settled, whatever, the cliche. I think. I don't think by the time that all happened, nothing really got done of any magnitude, I don't think, from what I can tell. Take a look at OBBB, whatever the acronym is for the big, beautiful bill. All that stuff, none of that stuff really seems to matter So one, why do we do it? And then two, how do we get back to focusing on efficiencies? And is there any way that we can start cutting some of the inefficiencies and redundancies out of the federal government in some form of bipartisan manner, understanding that we've got to get this under control? I'm very curious as to what you think about that.
I don't have a lot of confidence that that's the case because even USAID, which I think there's tons of pork within that, but this idea that all money spent in other countries is wasteful when if we step out, the Chinese step in,
Well,
and that's a conversation
there's
that
a
has
lot
to.
of truth to that.
That's the conversation that needs to be had with regards to spending in other countries, and so I think there's no bipartisan support for just about anything, and
Which is a shame.
and it's so I have very little confidence that we can get to a point where a bipartisan government task force looks at contracts and renegotiates and what have you across Medicare, Medicaid, all kinds of entitlement programs, what have you, across the board.
Things like making sure that all the various agencies' computers can talk to one another and share information. It seems like there's such a potential for some kind of efficiencies that we're just missing out on. It just is going to require the two political parties to put politics aside and come on. Let's do this for the betterment of the country, because if we can do this, the economy can grow that much more rapidly, and everyone will be lifted up in that case. But, oh my gosh, we just don't want to do it. Just absolutely don't want to do it.
Don't want to do it.
Don't want to do it. It's a shame. It's under our control. If only we would want it. All right, guys, thank you all so much for listening. We always love to hear from you. Also, if you have any comments or questions, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. As always, if you're interested in reading more or hearing more of what we got to say or how we think, you can go to oakworth.com, oakworth.com. Take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab for all kinds of exciting information. Now, with that being said, I also have to throw out a couple other caveats. Anything we say here, or Sam and I say on Trading Perspectives, are our opinions only and not necessarily those of Oakworth Capital Bank, its associates, directors, shareholders, and or stakeholders. Our opinions are subject to change and can change without notice. Market conditions will fluctuate, and anything that you hear here at Trading Perspectives does not constitute an offer to buy or sell investment securities in any way, shape, or form, or services. All right. With that, Sam, do you have anything else that you want to add to this very important topic?
That's all I've got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.